Happy Saturday, everyone. Ugh, of course, Monica is our wonderful digital person, and I knew this was going to happen. As soon as we started the stream, the Boone camera was going to go out. I'm going to step off for a second to see if I can get it back up. But Boone and King Street this morning is probably one of the areas that has the best rainfall shot. Let's see if we can get it back up. Let's see. Maybe get a beach now. Sorry, everybody. Well, it looks like that camera is gonna, just break my heart and not want to work. But good morning, happy Saturday. Sorry about that little hiccup. The computer I have to use for the streams is like across the room. So, um, happy Saturday. I missed you guys last week. If you were wondering where I was at a wedding, Labor Day weekend wedding for one of my good friends who is actually a news anchor in Birmingham, Alabama. So if you guys have friends and family there, go watch her. Today, though, I'm kind of sad to tell you that the forecast is not great for this weekend. Today's definitely going to be a stormier day than tomorrow, which you can probably guess already by looking at the storm activity right now. So there's actually a flash flood warning for areas east of us near Raleigh. They saw so much rain yesterday, so of course the flash flooding risk is a little bit higher there. It's more moderate locally, but we have had some flooding advisories in effect for parts of Watauga County. So I'm just going to stop talking and let's get right to it. So heavy rain. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Joy. Hopefully you guys are having a great day. The heavy rain is still falling in Boone, but it's starting to stabilize a little bit. If you notice over the past hour or so, we've seen lesser of that red, the heavy rain. So Boone, Jefferson, seeing some light to moderate rain there. Newland, Ingalls, the same. So pretty much Watauga County, Avery County, light to moderate, but there is a downpour moving toward Clifton, some light rain moving toward Chestnut Hill. Now, Caldwell County, mostly dry, Burke County, the same, but you saw rain earlier. So if you're waking up to some slick spots on the roads, you are not crazy. Your eyes are not deceiving you. We've also had a few storms moving through Concord, Kannapolis. Not seeing anything yet on our Kannapolis camera from the Atrium Health Ballpark camera, but I'll keep an eye on that. Some heavy rain for Concord, Reimer, up toward Rockwell, that is. Some of those plus signs that you'll see on radar, whether you're using our app or the one I'm showing you right here, do indicate some lightning. So just keep that in mind. But for the most part, I mean, honestly, the forecast today isn't the worst we've ever seen, certainly not the best. But I would just say that if you wanted to lay by the pool, one of my best friends, one of our producers, Jack, love him. We wanted to go to the pools today. Well, we talked about it a few weeks ago, but of course the forecast changes a lot. And it just doesn't look like that's going to happen because Sunday is going to be a much better day to do so. So if that's you, Sunday's your day to do it. Little light to moderate rain there still for eastern half of Stanley County near Albemarle, but a lot of the heavy rain that moved through Wadesboro, Anson County, Richmond County earlier has now started to shift out. You can see that moving toward Asheboro, Troy, but more storm activity is coming. And that's because there's a stalled front kind of right across the Charlotte area. And so the winds are coming south to north, and that's helping kind of push some of these storms into our area. So you can actually see some of the storms that were near Hartsville, Florence earlier are now starting to move into Chesterfield County. So light to moderate rain on the southern end there. Cheraw, you're probably going to get that within the next half an hour to an hour. And then just some spotty storms there in Lancaster County. Good morning, Kelsey, my best friend. She's always watching. So the reason why we're kind of seeing all this activity this morning, and really a lot of the Carolinas are, is because of this stalled front. What happens is, where exactly the front is determines how much storm activity we're going to have. So right now it's kind of, you guys can't of course see it, but it's kind of situated right over Charlotte, which is why we are kind of going to continue to see the showers and storms. Tomorrow it moves a little bit further south, so that should lessen our overall coverage. But anytime you have a stalled front nearby, you're pretty much guaranteed to know, often on showers and storms, more cloud cover, which oftentimes this time of year will lead to slightly cooler temperatures. Now, cooler is relative, but I mean, it was like 95 a few days ago. So the fact that we're only in the low to mid 80s is feeling overall much better. Yesterday, 85, today, 83 or so, and tomorrow around the same. So the overall weekend forecast is not as hot, which I think a lot of people could be excited about that. It's just the fact that it's not necessarily going to be an ideal pool outside weekend. You'll want to probably take some of those breaks and head inside. And a great way if you're out and about and you want to track the radar, always great tool to have, the WCT Charlotte mobile app. It really does come in clutch though, because I was at South Park after 5, looking at the forecast the other day to MC. And there was some light to moderate rain pretty much in like Pineville, South Charlotte, moving towards South Park. And it started to fizzle out. So I told people to go get their umbrellas just in case, because I did think there would be some light to moderate rain. But the storms kind of stayed on either side. Well, what happened about an hour and a half later is more rain, more storms started to move through. So it just helps you stay prepared, right? And stay weather aware. Now, as we're talking about storms, oftentimes I'm telling you severe storms, gusty winds, hail. That's certainly possible. We could see some gusty winds in excess of 60 miles per hour, and we could see some quarter-sized hail, which is about that big, about an inch. But today's biggest risk is actually flooding. And that's because we've seen rain a few days this week. The ground's already a little bit saturated. And then on top of that, we have this front nearby that's keeping the air warm and moist. And when the air is warm, it can hold more moisture. And that's what we talk about sometimes when we talk about like climate change and things like that, which that's more of like a long-term impact. Obviously, weather is different. But just in general, warm air can hold more moisture. So the warmer you are, the heavier rain you can have. So the bigger rainfall events. So let's say a storm that maybe 10 years ago would have only been 1 to 2 inches, it can be 2 to 3. But the general trend, though, with that warm air means a better chance for downpours. And it's downpour activity that can lead to that quick pileup of heavy rain. And so, because of that, and because of the fact that we have that saturated ground, we have elevated areas like the foothills and the mountains, we are going to see that risk of some localized flooding today. So, if you live in one of those areas I just mentioned, if you know that you're prone to flooding, you live by a creek, a pond, things like that, I don't know, maybe your backyard dips down and you know that that oftentimes can happen, please go ahead and make sure that you know the forecast, that you're staying weather aware. Oh, Bennettsville, you had a severe storm earlier. Yeah, a lot of that activity on the east side of the Carolinas is seeing more. But yeah, make sure you're staying weather aware. Make sure you know the forecast. You know what time the storms are expected to happen, which in today's case, it's kind of off and on all day, but also have a way to get those alerts. So if you're in an area, I don't know, let's say you're just going out, maybe just trying to get lunch with your family, and you see a flash flood warning, for example, you know what to do, get to higher ground, things like that. But that's just kind of my quick soapbox for today, just because I feel like we get so conditioned sometimes to only be talking about the gusty winds, the hail. So I do want to focus on that flooding risk today. Now, the positive news I can give you, because you guys know I like to always kind of look on the bright side of things, is that tomorrow we are going to see lesser rainfall coverage, and also lesser rain means a lower storm risk, but also just in general, the risk kind of shifts a little bit further north and lowers. So the reason why this is shifting to the north is because higher elevations versus it's not like we're expected to see a lot of rain. And so this is a positive trend that we'll see. And then I'm actually not going to progress you toward Monday because we don't have a risk of localized flooding anywhere in the Carolinas, or at least substantially. So not worried about that. So because of the moderate risk I told you about a second ago, y'all saw that in yellow, there is a flood watch officially in effect for pretty much all of our counties. Now, this is where things get a little bit dicey. A lot of the times when it comes to a watch or a warning, whether it's a heat advisory, a flood watch like this one, a lot of the times the difference between whether one is issued or not has to do with different National Weather Service forecast offices, because they have different thresholds. In this case, I think this is because our southern areas haven't seen as much rain, so there is that lesser risk. But just overall, I think everyone has a risk, I guess you could say. So I just want everybody to kind of stay weather aware. Again, especially up in the mountains and foothills where elevation is higher, so north of I-40. But you can see that official flood watch in effect for Union County, Mecklenburg County, Gaston, Lincoln, Catawba, Cleveland, Burke, Caldwell, both mountains, and greater Watauga, Ashe, Iredell, Alexander, Rowan, Cabarrus. And that's it. So yeah, it's constantly impressed that I can remember all those 22 counties. But just because my memory can be a little bit funky sometimes. So when a flood watch is issued in this particular case, it's because we're expecting a maximum total, so isolated highest totals of about 2 to 5 inches of rain. That does not mean everyone's going to see it. In fact, you can look at the forecast, kind of a range of the next 3 days. 1 to 2 is kind of the maximum. But it's easy to forecast rainfall when it's kind of a consistent rain that's coming all day, or I wouldn't say easy, but easier, versus these pop-up showers and storms. They can literally accumulate 2 to 3 inches, sometimes per hour in an instant, let's say in Mint Hill, but then Matthews will see nothing. So it's kind of hard to forecast exactly where the heaviest bands will set up. But I just want everybody to know in general, probably 1 to 2 at a maximum, and 2 is probably pushing it. And so I apologize for those of you who want rain, but if you have one of those downpours that pops up right over you, you could accumulate as high as 4, if not even 5. And that's why the flood watch is in effect. So hopefully all of that makes sense. Good morning, Aiden. Good morning, Christopher. Good morning, Belvin. Hopefully you're having a great day. Okay, so future cast, let's kind of go throughout the day. Again, this is kind of just showing the off and on shower and storm potential a little bit higher today versus what we're going to see on Sunday. What is interesting is we did have some storms overnight or I guess really this morning around the time I was going to work at about 3 a.m. And tomorrow, I do think a few of those storms will be possible. So if you're an early riser like myself, you get up at 3 and you're at work by 4, you could see some of these. Or if you really, really, really love to stay up late, you could see some of those too. But the overall risk in general of storms tomorrow is much less. It doesn't mean we're not going to see rain and storms, but the coverage overall will be less widespread. So again, if you had to pick one day to get outside this weekend, I would pick tomorrow. That doesn't mean there won't be a few clouds around. That doesn't mean we won't see some storms. It's just that today has a much higher risk of those storms compared to tomorrow. And you can kind of see how that's a little bit clearer as we go with Futurecast. I will tell you that every single model today has been CRAV in terms of picking up the rain. So this trend, thankfully, of higher rain chances Saturday versus Sunday has been consistent. So I'm positive about that. I'm just not as positive in terms of the higher coverage for areas in the mountains, for example, because some of the models this morning weren't showing anything for southern communities, but then you just saw that Chesterfield is about to get doused with rain. So the models just have not been doing good. But again, in terms of overall coverage, Saturday is going to be highest weekend forecast, regardless, low to mid 80s, some strong to severe storms today. That's that gusty wind, the lightning, and especially the flood risk. Okay, let's talk Hurricane Lee. I'm sure all of you loyal WCNC Charlotte weather watchers, you've been with Brad, you've been with Larry, you've been with Chris, you've been with KJ and I with these storms. I have a lot of tropical experience, thankfully, because I have worked in other tropical markets. But Lee has been an interesting storm so far for a multitude of reasons. First of all, it's the strongest storm of this season so far, but it's really tapped into a lot of the more moist air out in the Atlantic Ocean because there haven't been a lot of other storms, and it almost doubly rapidly intensified. So rapid intensification is classified as 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period, and this one was like closer to like 80 in a 24-hour period, which is very intense. The storm peaked at a category 5 intensity a few days ago, is now a category 3. Now, what's interesting is you look at the satellite imagery, and hopefully you guys are all, weather nerds like me, find this interesting, but the storm has started to kind of get ripped apart by wind shear. Wind shear in a tornado situation when we're forecasting severe weather is good because you need kind of those updrafts and that wind change. But with a hurricane, it's kind of sitting flat like this, as it moves, and it kind of rips storms apart. So it disrupts their center of circulation. And you can kind of see that on satellite, how just a few days ago, Lee looked so much better and like more compact, whereas now it kind of looks a little bit what we call sheared because of the wind shear. What's I guess positive for Lee as a storm is that if you look at the little bright shaded areas of pink in the center, not near the eye, that's convection, that's storms. So the fact that that's still happening means the storm is still very robust. It's just not as strong as it was a few days ago. Again, I don't like using the term weekend when it's still a category 3 hurricane. Technically it did, it was downgraded, but it's still a very strong, powerful hurricane. So this is kind of the look over the past few days. 160, 155, 165 is where it peaked, and then now we're at 115. So again, this is a category 3 hurricane. It is still classified as a major hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, which I do want to remind folks that when we talk about hurricanes and tropical storms, that scale is solely based on wind. So if there's ever been a situation where you've looked at a hurricane, you said, oh my goodness, this one was a category 5, but the storm surge in this one was so much higher. It is only based on wind. And the classification of that wind, it's not based on storm surge, rainfall, things like that. So you could have a slow moving tropical storm, like what happened with Harvey. It made landfall as a hurricane, but then weekend became a tropical storm, and it doused Houston with all that rain. So latest update was at 5 o'clock. Because there's no tropical storm, hurricane watches and warnings in effect yet, they're not going to start to do those 3-hour updates. So we're still getting tracks every 6. So 5 a.m., Category 3, 115 miles per hour. I know the hurricane hunters are going to be flying kind of in and out over the next few days to kind of track Lee. But again, the change in intensity has a lot to do with wind shear and some water temperature changes. But also another big thing too is that fluctuations in intensity is very, very normal, especially with any like small changes as it moves. Do apologize for the noise. I have to keep my notifications on so I could hear our digital person if she's trying to talk to us. So you're going to hear that ding ding if they're talking on Teams. Okay, so Hurricane Lee's forecast track out 5 days. You can see the category 3 is expected to move north northwest, and then now we can kind of finally see that turn to the north in that 5-day cone. The thing about the cone is that the center of circulation is where the cone is forecasting for. So if a storm is hundreds of miles large, you're going to feel impacts very far from the center. So when you see like the western half, just a few hundred miles from Turks and Caicos, for example, the storm itself is still going to have impacts there, things like swells of that nature. And the center really only falls in this cone about 2/3 of the time. So there are still times where that doesn't necessarily happen. So I just kind of want us to remember that. The second thing I want us to remember is that past about the cone's forecast, one of the reasons why we don't go out past 5 days is because the forecast confidence is much lower. Now, in this case, there's very good confidence that the north turn is going to happen. The bigger question is when it's going to happen. And there's a few different scenarios that are going to influence where the turn happens. I've seen some talks on social media about how models are bad, blah, blah, blah. Hurricanes create their own paths, things like that. A large hurricane can certainly disrupt slightly steering currents, but it doesn't have that kind of an impact. So we're just going to kind of walk through the models and changes and things like that. Here's the wind scale. I probably should have put that before the last graphic, but it is a category 3, winds of 115 miles per hour. So model data has been very consistent in terms of there is no forecast model that has a storm making landfall in the Carolinas. This many, 0. That's good news. What we are watching is the influence of a high of low pressure called the Bermuda High. It's always often there in the Western Atlantic this time of year, and a strong what's called a trough of low pressure coming across the eastern seaboard, cold front, essentially. So hurricanes and tropical storms take the path of least resistance. And what I mean by that is when you have a trough like this and a high, like what you see on your screen, it's going to kind of sandwich itself between the two. It's not going to go east, which is why storms move the way that they do. Now, the current pattern still looks to have the center off the coast of the United States. When I say the current pattern in terms of consensus models and trends and patterns. But there have been some models that have shown a slightly westward track. Not all, but some. And so what that means for us in the Carolinas would mean maybe some higher impacts along the coast in terms of dangerous beach conditions, erosion, rip currents. Now, what unfortunately is looking less likely is what would be a weaker ridge, so a weaker area of high pressure, so it'd be a little bit further east, allowing the storm to completely stay off the coast of not just the United States, but Canada too. I'm less and less positive that this is a scenario. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change back. We know how these tropical systems work, and there is very, very low confidence past those 5 days about where the storm is going to go. But what I like is the positive trend that we still have not seen a storm landfall in any model in the Carolinas. And we're watching it every single day, every single run. Myself, Brad, Larry, Chris Cage, everybody. Now the worst case scenario for not just us, but really for most of the eastern seaboard, let's see if this graphic wants to progress, would be a stronger high that would kind of shove it a little bit further west. So again, there has been some trend slightly further west, but there's still nothing that shows it coming here. There are still some models that have shown potential toward the New England states, Maine, Nova Scotia, eastern coastal Canada. So that's not, first of all, everything is a possibility still. So everything is still in play. It's just looking more and more likely that it will stay on its current trajectory, which would be just west of Bermuda and just east of us and stay, slightly out to sea, but maybe go toward Canada. But there's still no model, again, that has it coming to us in the Carolinas. And you can see those models right now. These are the spaghetti plots. Again, kind of seeing good clustering in the near term, long term, not so much. You can see some of those isolated ones going toward the New England Eastern Seaboard. So we just have to watch this as not really I mean, Carolinas, yes, because of the beach impacts, but kind of as a country too, just because of the Eastern Seaboard and wanting to kind of, help keep people informed, help keep people safe. There have been a lot of, questions, comments on social media about my neighbor told me it was coming here. No. I saw something about a category 6. No such thing. And social media, the internet can be positive in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it makes our job as forecasters harder because you're kind of filtering through some of that misinformation. Another thing that Lee's going to do, which kind of hurts its confidence in terms of the long-term forecast, is it is going to slow down a little bit, and that's why the shifts in the highs and lows is going to be so, so, so important. I'm using this model just to show you this is the GFS, the American model. If that were to come to perfect fruition, the current kind of path that it's showing, just west of Bermuda, a few hundred miles away from the coast. But that's a close proximity. And as Brad said in one of his videos, I think earlier this week, a little too close to comfort, which is why we're keeping such a close eye on it. But it's also really more so for the immediate coastline. I mean, they just saw impacts in terms of beach erosion, road currents because of the Idalia. And then now, of course, this storm. So just not ideal. But the same strong storm system, same cold front that is expected to keep Lee away from specifically the Carolinas is going to bring us nicer weather. So kind of a reminder that there's ebbs and flows and kind of everything can have some positives, negatives at times. Now, because of that, we know that the Carolinas, again, will be impacted in some capacity, most likely just beach conditions. So low risk today, if you're heading to Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Morehead City, the Outer Banks. Tomorrow, low for most of the early half of the day, and then it does look that we could see some moderate risk a little bit later in the afternoon and evening. You're probably not going to the beach at midnight, so not worry about that. More moderate on Monday, and then we kind of see that high risk Tuesday and beyond just because of the slow speed. I mean, models are still showing literally a week from today, the storm is still offshore and we're still talking about it. And again, when we see that slow down, that's where things kind of get a little bit question marky. Question marky is not a word, Brittany. But I just want everyone to know that there is still no model that hasn't come into the Carolinas. We are watching the trends. We are keeping a very close eye on them. But I'm seeing positivity in not only the short-term consistency, but the long-term consistency that nothing is showing it coming here right now. If that were to change, our team is on it. We are forecasting it. We are watching it. And we will keep you updated every step of the way. So I want to shift to the positive of the storm, regardless of what happens, is that it is going to bring that cold front across the eastern United States and bring us some slightly drier, slightly cooler air for next weekend, which is a big weekend here in the Carolinas. So after scattered storms today being a little bit more widespread, lesser coverage tomorrow, we're kind of in that midday lull, mid to upper 80s, a few chances for rain and storms. And then it looks like that best chance for rain and storms will be with that cold front sweeping through Wednesday. And that's going to drop our temperatures both Thursday and Friday to highs in the upper 70s and even some lows in the 50s. This will be probably even a little bit cooler than last weekend, which I heard was great. Sad I wasn't here. And then this will continue likely, this pattern of Thursday, Friday, being a little bit cooler, drier into Saturday, which is a big weekend because, which I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, ECU, which I know it's East Carolina because one time I said Eastern on accident and Larry corrected me very kindly. So don't worry, ECU fans, I will not make that mistake again. But ECU at App State and Boone at 3:30, and then Georgia State is going to be at the Charlotte 49ers at 6 o'clock. So it's a big weekend. So we're at least happy that regardless of what happens with the hurricane, we likely will see that better weather by next weekend. I know the stream is a little bit longer. Thank you for all who kind of stayed watching it the entire time. Please leave any questions, comments, just related to the weather, in the comment section. Send me an email, send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, email, whatever, and let me know your questions and I will try to answer those maybe in our stream tomorrow. I just want everyone to kind of have peace of mind that we are still watching it. And so anytime during hurricane season, I would tell people to have their hurricane kits ready and things like that, because I think it's important. I mean, I know where all my important documents are, things like that, even though I would obviously still be here, just in case I had to bring them to the station or something like that. But also, by the same token, it's not something to panic about. It's something that, the people you trust, your meteorologists, are watching extremely closely, and we will continue to do so for the next week, week and a half, 2 weeks, however long it takes. Again, thank you so much for being here. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments that I can answer, help alleviate maybe some of your concern. And I'll see you tomorrow morning on Wake Up Charlotte Weekend starting at 6 a.m. If you're a college football fan, I hope all of your teams win today, and have a great rest of your Saturday, everyone.